After putting on a cursed clown costume, a real estate agent begins to transform into a flesh-eating demon. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Clown, from 2014. On the day of her son Jack's birthday, a woman called Meg decides to throw a clown-themed party, because even though he's little, the boy is in love with the comedians. Because of this, Meg hires a professional clown to liven up Jack's party, but the man doesn't show up and calls after the celebration has started to say he won't be able to make it. Not knowing what to do, Meg calls her husband Kent, who works as a real estate agent and is finishing fixing up one of their houses. When he learns that the clown won't be coming, Kent starts looking for a costume that will fit and finds a trunk with a complete clown costume, which he uses to liven up his son's party. After the celebration is over, Kent takes his son to his room and goes to the sofa to talk to his wife. Excited, Meg asks him to take off his costume and tells him that she has a big surprise to tell him. But as soon as she leaves, Kent falls asleep before his wife returns. The next morning, the man wakes up to Meg calling to take Jack to school, telling him that they're already late and that he'll have to wear the costume. As he has to go to a meeting, Kent tries to refuse, but his son is already late and he accepts. While Jack finishes his coffee, the broker goes to the bathroom to wash his face. But even after a lot of scrubbing, the makeup doesn't come off. With no time to lose, Kent decides to take Jack anyway, leaving the boy at school and going to one of his houses. When he arrives at the place, the realtor starts talking to the employees who will be removing the carpet, but as he is dressed as a clown, no one recognizes him. After introducing himself, the broker takes the employees inside and goes to the bathroom to remove his makeup, but the paint remains in place. Frustrated, Kent tries to remove the wig or the nose, but nothing seems to come off. Agonized, the man tries to take off the clown costume, but he can't remove it even with all his strength. Out of options, Kent grabs a blade from the drawer and tries to cut the costume, but all he manages to do is open a nasty wound on his wrist. After bandaging up, the man goes to the other workers in the room and picks up a mini chainsaw, placing it next to his chest and turning it on to cut off the costume. Even though it's a bad idea, the man applies all his strength trying to get the suit off, but all he manages to do is break the saw. Frustrated, Kent gives up and goes home. Seeing that her husband is still dressed as a clown, Meg asks why he hasn't taken off his costume and Kent explains everything he went through trying to remove it. Even though she doesn't believe him, Meg grabs her medical instruments and helps her husband by pulling out the red ball in his nose, but the object is so stuck that a piece of flesh comes off. While the man writhes in pain, the dog eats his clown nose and Meg goes over to help him, realizing that the wig has taken the place of Kent's real hair. Hearing the noise, Jack goes to the bathroom and Meg has to leave her husband to take the boy to bed. Because of the wound on his nose, Kent goes to the hospital where a doctor bandages it. Back at home, the broker starts to feel unusually hungry, but even though he eats cake and other food, his stomach is still rumbling. The next morning, Meg wakes up to take Jack to school and finds her kitchen completely ransacked, as well as a note from her husband saying he's going to find out what's going on. Back at the house where he found the costume, Kent calls the company and asks his secretary to check the records to see who owned the property, but while he's talking to the woman, he realizes that the costume chest is chained up and decides to check the paperwork himself. When he arrives at the office, the man takes the folder and goes to a cafeteria to read the document, discovering that Martin Carlson, the former owner, has passed away. While thinking about what to do, Kent notices a child watching and his stomach begins to growl even more, even though he has just eaten several dishes. Still at a loss, the clown goes to a Halloween costume store and gets the number of a man who has the same surname as Martin. From his car, Kent calls the number and asks to talk about the clown costume, but for some reason, the man on the other end is visibly terrified and begs him not to touch the costume. Startled, Kent says he's already dressed and the man immediately invites him to his house, giving him the address. After driving for some time, the realtor arrives at the place and meets Bert Carlson, the brother of the former owner of the Fantasy. After introducing himself to the visitor, Bert offers him a cup of tea and explains a little about the origin of the costume, saying that he and his brother created it for a failed clown. Curious, Kent asks how they're going to get the costume off and Bert replies by telling him a little about the origin of the clown, saying that it was a creature with white skin and a red nose because it lived in the icy mountains. To feed himself, the clown would lure 5 children into his cave and devour one every winter month. Over the centuries, this story has been forgotten and the clown has become something that most children love. Suddenly, Kent starts to feel dizzy and asks why he's telling him this, but ends up blacking out before Bert can answer. Sometime later, Kent wakes up and the dressmaker tells him that the tea should keep him asleep for much longer. Bert then says he'll take some more and claims that cutting off the body parts is the only way to stop the demon. Hearing this, Kent despairs and manages to break free of his bonds at the last second, only to be hit by Bert's cleaver, which gets stuck in his shoulder. Furious, the real estate agent takes the blade out of his body and throws it back at the seamstress, tackling him and managing to disarm him. With the revolver in hand, Kent asks what he intended to do, and Bert replies that it's not a costume, but the demon's skin. Without knowing what this means, the realtor drives home and starts telling Meg about what happened, telling her to call the police and talking about the wound Bert made on his shoulder. Desperate, Kent tells her that the dressmaker thinks he's a demon and begs his wife not to tell anyone because they'll think he's crazy, but without realizing it, he's just told Meg's family, who are on the sofa listening to everything. Not believing him, the father-in-law asks what Kent's problem is and orders him to let his daughter go. To prove that he is telling the truth, the man decides to show the wound on his shoulder and takes everyone to see Bert, who is trapped in his car, making the family think that he has captured an innocent man. Thinking it's a joke, Meg's brother tries to take off his clown wig and Kent ends up breaking his arm, scaring his wife and son, who are watching from the window. So as not to terrify them even more, the man decides to leave and drive with Bert to the police station, but halfway there, he begins to transform and his fingers and toes become extremely long. Realizing this, Bert jumps forward and uses the handcuff to squeeze Kent's neck, causing him to lose control of the car and crash into a wall. After the accident, the broker gets out of the vehicle completely unharmed and pulls Bert out, asking him why he's doing this. Even though he's hurt, the dressmaker tells him that he must take his own life before it's too late, and then blacks out. Suddenly, Kent sees two children in a car that has stopped to help and his stomach starts rumbling, sending him into a kind of hallucination that makes him run into the forest. At a nearby campsite, a boy is taking a dish to wash when he hears a stomach growling. Looking around, the boy meets Kent, who asks if he has anything to eat. Being a Boy Scout, the boy doesn't think twice and takes a cookie from his pocket to give to the stranger, but when he gets close, Kent grabs the young man's arm and rips his fingers off with a single bite. The next morning, Meg goes to the school principal and asks him not to let Kent take Jack. After making the request, the woman says goodbye to her son and leaves, but Colton and other students see Meg kissing Jack and the boy ends up becoming the target of the bullies. After feeding on human flesh for the first time, Kent realizes that his original teeth are falling out and decides to isolate himself, going to one of his houses to hide. As he unlocks the door, Kent is greeted by a boy who starts talking to him, which makes his stomach rumble loudly. Even though he was extremely hungry, the realtor asked the boy to stay away and locked himself inside the house, sitting in front of the door while he tried to resist temptation. At home, Meg is trying to control the dog that went crazy after eating Kent's nose. Suddenly, she receives a call from her husband, who says he's sorry for everything that's happening. Finally, the man says that this is the only way and ends the call, leaving Meg even more worried. After hanging up, Kent uses the revolver to end it all and fires without thinking twice, but after a few seconds unconscious, he wakes up as if nothing had happened. As it didn't work out, the clownish realtor goes to a construction store and buys some saws, as well as some other materials. At home, Meg decides to go after her husband and goes to various properties in search of where he might be hiding. While she searches, Kent sets up a bizarre gambit, placing two saws facing each other and sitting on a chair to fall headfirst into the blades. After a while trying to gather his courage, the man loses his balance and ends up falling sideways, knocking over the saws and coming out completely unscathed. At that moment, the boy enters the house to see if he is all right and ends up being hit by a part of the broken blade, falling to the ground lifeless. Despite feeling guilty at first, Kent's stomach soon starts rumbling and he has his first bizarre meal. Not knowing what her husband is eating, Meg arrives at the house and starts unlocking the door. In order not to be found out, the broker asks her not to open up and the woman does everything she can to calm him down, saying that she believes him and just wants to take him home. When Kent doesn't answer, Meg says she needs him and reveals that she's pregnant, saying that's what she was going to tell him the day he put on the costume. After the revelation, Kent opens the door and asks Meg to take him away, leaving only the bones of the boy behind. In the basement, the ex-broker tells her that he is changing and asks his wife to put him in chains, saying that she must not let him out under any circumstances. After arresting her husband, Meg wants to understand what's going on and starts reading Bert's book, finding a headline about the Carlson brothers and a photo of Bert wearing a clown costume. Wanting to know how he managed to remove it, Meg goes to the dressmaker in the hospital and starts asking questions. Since he can't speak, the man writes in a notebook asking where Kent is, as well as saying that he is the only one who can help him. As the woman doesn't want to tell the truth, Bert asks her not to trust Kent and refuses to answer her. Furious, Meg asks how he got the costume and shows him the photo she found, but this ends up making Bert agitated and the nurse decides to throw her out. Wanting to find out more, Meg goes to the house where Kent found the suit and discovers a camera pointed at a chair with handcuffs. While the woman analyzes the recordings, Jack is at school crying about his father. As soon as he realizes this, Colton goes up to the boy and starts to tease him, insulting his parents while he fills his hand with glue to smear it on his face. In a rage, Jack bites the bully's hand and starts running back home before the appointed time. After running across town, Jack arrives home and starts looking for his mother. Hearing the boy's voice, he asks if Meg isn't home and convinces Jack to go down to the basement. Still apprehensive, the boy goes downstairs and finds Kent chained up. Without realizing that this is no longer his father, the boy approaches him and tells him about the bullies at school, saying that Colton wanted to rub glue in his face. Back at the Carlson house, Meg sees a recording of someone dressed as a clown flailing around wildly, as well as a doctor bringing in a wheelchair. To continue investigating, Meg decides to take the camera home when she receives a call from a friend who was supposed to pick Jack up from school. Confused, the woman says she got ready and got there on time, but when she went to look for the boy, he had already left. Afraid that Jack will end up in the basement, Meg rushes into the house and starts looking for her son, finding him safe in the living room. Still afraid, the woman asks why Jack left school and where his father is. Far away, Colton is playing Halo on call with his friends when he notices someone behind him. As he was supposed to be alone, the boy warned his friends about an intruder and went to get a nunchaku to defend himself. Looking for a stranger, Colton finds Kent and lowers his guard in confusion, asking if Jack is there. As the clown approaches, one of the friends on the call talks about what Colton wanted to do with the glue, confirming that the boy really upsets Jack and was planning to beat him up the next day. Upon hearing this, the hooded clown jumps on Colton's neck and brutally devours him, throwing his heart against the television. At home, Meg starts packing up to go out with her son when she realizes that her dog has gotten loose. Just as possessed as Kent, the satanic dog goes after his owner without a second thought, but just as she's about to be devoured, Bert appears and heads the dog off. Seeing her dog lose his life, the woman goes into shock and Bert has to reassure her to ask where Kent is. With Meg calmer, Bert starts pulling his teeth while telling her the truth about the suit, saying that he found it by accident in his store. In a shipment from Iceland, the man found the costume in perfect condition, better than any other product that had ever passed through his store. Before selling it to a circus, Bert wanted to put the costume to good use and decided to dress up as a clown to cheer up the children at the hospital where his brother worked. Soon after, his transformation began and Martin promised to find a cure. After the promise, Bert blacked out and only regained consciousness a few days later, without the costume and with the curse broken. While his brother was possessed, Martin took 5 sick children from the hospital and gave them to the devil, one for each month of the Icelandic winter. When he got what he wanted, the demon removed Bert's fantasy and let him live his life. After that, Bert spent the next few years thinking of a way to break the curse while Martin protected the costume until the end. After hearing the story, Meg says that her husband wouldn't be able to devour someone and Bert shows her the Boy Scout's fingers that he ripped off. To prevent this from happening again, the man asks where Kent went and Jack shows up to tell him that he went to Colton. With this information, Meg takes Jack to her father's house and drives off without giving any further explanation. At Colton's house, the pair arrive and find no sign of Kent, only the boy's partially devoured body. Thinking of possible places where he could be, Meg remembers that there is a Chuck E. Cheese's nearby and decides to go there to look for him. When they arrive at the place, Meg asks Bert to wait in the car and promises to bring her husband to him. Inside the restaurant, a boy enters a tunnel toy looking for his younger brother. As he crawls around the place, the boy finds a stretch covered in blood and handprints, but he still doesn't feel afraid and continues looking for his brother. Following the bloody tunnel, the boy finds Kent totally possessed, trying to devour his brother. As soon as he sees the scene, the young man distracts the clown so that the youngest runs away and ends up being devoured instead, causing his blood to flow down the slide and alerting the other families who start running around desperately. Noticing the confusion, Meg continues looking for her husband when she is pulled into the kitchen by Bert. The man shows her some blood marks on the floor and tells her to follow, leading the woman straight to where Kent is. Confused, the man asks what happened and Meg says they are there to help. While the couple are talking, Bert appears and tries to chop Kent's head off with an axe, causing him to revert to his possessed form. Driven mad, the former stockbroker manages to knock Bert down and almost devours him, but Meg manages to stop him by begging him not to do it. For some reason, the demon decides to give her a chance and says that there is only one child left, telling her that she must give him one or else Jack will be his last prey. Just then, the police arrive and Meg leaves the restaurant, leaving Bert to be captured by the police as the main suspect. Outside, the woman calls her father and asks him to run away with Jack. While his father asks what's going on, the woman sees a lost child and ends the call to pick him up, but just as she's getting close, the boy's mother appears and hugs him. Not knowing what to do, Meg goes to her car and starts listening to the radio when a girl knocks on her window asking for a ride. So as not to waste the chance, the woman says she'll help and starts driving away, taking advantage of the girl's sleep to take her to the appointed place. When they arrive at their destination, Meg wakes the girl up and asks her to get out of the car, but the girl gets scared and starts banging on the window asking to get in. As the woman is repenting, a policeman appears and asks Meg to wait while he talks to the girl. Confused, the woman wonders why the demon hasn't appeared and comes to the conclusion that he's gone after Jack, driving back to town while trying to talk to his father. As he doesn't answer her calls, Meg assumes that her has gone to her house and crosses the city to get to her destination. There, the woman meets up with her father and begins to explain what's going on, but while they're talking, the clown appears and rips the old man's jaw off with a single blow. After seeing her father lose his life in front of her eyes, Meg runs to the garage and grabs a sledgehammer to defend herself. While she waits for the demon to appear, Jack starts down the stairs and the woman signals for him to go back up. After the boy leaves, the lumbering beast appears and takes a sledgehammer to the face. Even so, the hooded clown manages to disarm Meg and pins her leg against the car, taking advantage of the fact that she can't escape to try and pull the baby out of her belly. As the demon is busy, Meg shouts for Jack to run and he runs to the locked exit, forcing him to hide under the stairs. With a thirst for blood, the clown starts looking for Jack and Meg goes after him, grabbing a knife and hitting him several times in an attempt to stop him. With the weapon, the woman manages to cut the demon's neck, but it's not enough to eliminate him and the clown rips a chunk out of Meg's shoulder, throwing her against the cupboard immediately afterwards. Now that the woman is unconscious, the clown searches for his son and manages to find his hiding place, but the place is too small and the demon moves away. Thinking he has given up, Jack tries to leave when the monster reappears and covers the exit with some bricks. Now that the only way out is blocked, the clown from the underworld breaks the ladder and tries to catch him from above, but Meg wakes up in time and fastens a chain around the creature's neck. As he struggles to reach Jack, the monster almost rips his own head off and becomes much weaker. Meg takes the sledgehammer and prepares to deliver the final blow when Kent speaks from inside the demon, asking her to help him. Thinking she can still save him, the woman asks Jack to take the book and some more chains, but the boy refuses, saying that this isn't his father. Realizing that it hasn't worked, the monster tries to attack them once again and takes a sledgehammer blow so hard that its head detaches from its body, causing a huge amount of colored blood to gush out. Relieved, Meg hugs her son and begins to apologize when the demon grabs Jack's leg. To save him, the woman finishes ripping out the last nerve endings with her hand and the clown's body begins to dissolve, leaving only Kent's head and costume behind. After all these crimes, the police begin to investigate and take all of Kent's belongings as evidence, including the suit, leaving everything in storage. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.